I'm going to call to order the April 19th, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Here.
Supervisor Hines. Supervisor Scott.
Here.
Chair Bronson.
Here.
Let the record show all members are present.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to be offered today by Supervisor Grijalva, with the land acknowledgement statement to follow, to be offered by Herminia Frias, council member from Pascoyaki.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yo le doy mi altar a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América, a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, indivisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you, Supervisor. Ms. Councilmember Frias, if you'd like to read the land acknowledgement statement. And thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you on behalf of the Pascoyaki tribe for allowing me this moment to read the land acknowledgement. On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Tohono O'odham Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pascoyaki tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive towards building equal partner relationships with Arizona tribal nations. I'd like to just say a couple of words. Just thank you for allowing us, and just introduce myself as Herminia Frias, one of the tribal council members for Pascoyaki tribe. And also congratulate Jan Lesher for serving as the county administrator, and thank Mr. Chuck Huckleberry for his service as the county administrator, and also wish him our well wishes on his continued recovery. Muchísimas gracias, and Dios en chocotesia.
Thank you.
Gracias, and thank you for joining us. And you just came, I think, from some Easter services over the weekend. And we used to attend those all the time. Didn't make it this year, but I assume that they went well, and so glad you do this, your tribe.
Thank you. And this year was the first year that was opened back up for the public. Last year it was kind of open, and the year before it wasn't because of the pandemic, but this year it was one of the years that we had the chance to open it back up to the public, and it was very nice to be able to have our ceremonies. And we've had the ceremonies, but it was just a different way of doing it, with our focus mostly on our ceremonial participants. But it's always good to have everyone there to participate, because that's part of it. So thank you so much. And it's not just during our Easter ceremonies, that is really the big time. But, we continue to have our ceremonies all year long. So, we if there's a time for you to come and join us, we will certainly let you know, so you can come and experience what it is that we do within our culture. And it's a very beautiful culture, and you really have to experience it and to be there and appreciate what we do as women.
Thank you. All right, let's
You're
move
welcome.
on.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And now we move on to pause for pause. Do we have that video ready?
Hi everybody, my name's Monica. I'm the director here at Pima Animal Care Center, and today for Paws, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Boo. She is quite possibly the most perfect move-in ready dog for you. Boo is about 4 years and 8 months, so the perfect age. You know exactly what you're gonna get. She has experience living with other dogs successfully. She's house trained. She knows sit and crate. Her pastimes are chasing bugs and birds. And then besides Boo, come on down, we've got hundreds of animals for you to choose from to adopt. Our adoption fees are waived. For dogs, it would just be a $20 licensing fee that you'd be looking at. All cats, kittens, dogs, and puppies have a fee-waived adoption, and if you've lost your pet, we are waiving fees in most cases. Also, don't forget, upcoming Saturday the 23rd is a Tucson Subaru's Pets of Pima parade. It is going to be so much fun, and this isn't just a dog parade, this is a pet parade. So you can bring your cats, you can bring your turtles, you can bring your chickens, your parrots, your snakes, you name it. Bring your pets on down and join us for the Pets of Pima parade. You can register at friendsofpac.org.
And we would love to see all of the board members at the parade this weekend.
Thanks, you guys. Hope to see you Saturday. Bye.
Thank you, Monica. All right, we have some changes to the agenda, on the regular agenda, page 4, item 13. This is just for information only. This item requires a unanimous vote of approval per Board of Supervisors Policy D29.11. And then on the addendum agenda, page 1, item 4, this item will be heard at 10 a.m. Those are the changes to the agenda, and if there are no objections, the agenda is so amended. Now we move on to presentations and proclamations. Item 5, presentation of a proclamation to Diane Alexander, President, and Linda Hurst, Team Evaluator, Pets Partners of Southern Arizona, proclaiming the day of Saturday, April 30th, 2022, to be National Therapy Animal Day. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Supervisor Scott will make the presentation, and I think we're going to also get to see Gidget, who is a Labradoodle, and Matisse, who is a flat-coated Wheaten Terrier, who are therapy dogs. So I think you're going to steal, the two of you are going to steal the show today.
Before I read the proclamation, do you want to introduce your colleagues, and including the four-legged colleagues?
Yes, they're the most important ones. We are their staff. This is Gidget, and she is a very experienced therapy dog. And Matisse, who's one of our newer members, and their handlers, Linda Hurst and Jan Koharek. And then also I'd like to introduce Ashley Drew, who's from our national headquarters for Pet Partners, but lives here in Tucson.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to ask if you don't mind holding the proclamation, and I will read it. Whereas there are thousands of Pet Partners therapy animal teams serving in communities across the United States, and whereas Pet Partners has designated April 30 as National Therapy Animal Day, and whereas Pet Partners therapy animal teams throughout the city of Tucson and Pima County play an essential role in improving human health and well-being through the human-animal bond, and whereas Pet Partners therapy animal teams make millions of visits per year in settings such as hospitals, nursing homes, schools, and hospices. And whereas Pet Partners therapy animal teams interact with a variety of people in our community, including veterans, seniors, patients, students facing literacy challenges, those approaching end of life, first responders, and incarcerated individuals. And whereas these exceptional therapy animals who partner with their human companions bring comfort and healing to those in need, and whereas Pet Partners of Southern Arizona is the community partner of Pet Partners, now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Saturday, April 2022 to be National Therapy Animal Day in Pima County, and encourage our citizens to celebrate Pet Partners of Southern Arizona, our therapy animals, and their human handlers. Further, we publicly salute the service of therapy animal teams in our community and in communities across the nation. Congratulations.
And maybe they'd like to say a few words. Oh,
Did you want to say anything else, ma'am?
Just on behalf of the 70-plus teams that work throughout southern Arizona, just like to thank the community, thank Pima County for their ongoing support.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh.
I know. Usually after a board meeting, all of us need therapy, so, no. All right, we have another presentation on the addendum, item number 1 on the addendum, presentation of a proclamation to Jeff Kahn, Acting Superintendent, and Cam Juarez, Community Engagement Outreach Coordinator, Saguaro National Park, proclaiming the week of April 24th through 30th, 2022, to be National Park Service Week. I'll move the item. Motion and a second. If there are no objection, motion carries. Supervisor Grijalva will make the presentation.
Head on. Yes, okay. How about I read the proclamation, then you can talk a little bit about it if you want to? Does that sound good? Okay. So, whereas the 424 national park sites in the United States are vitally important to creating and maintaining the quality of life we desire in our communities, including Tucson and Pima County, and whereas our national parks protect vulnerable resources for current and future generations, improve the public health, and contribute to the economic and environmental well-being of our communities and regions, and whereas the national parks build healthy and active communities, highlight the fight against climate change, aid in prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally and physically disabled, and improve the mental and emotional health of all residents. And whereas the national parks increase communities' economic prosperity through increased property values, I didn't touch it. Expansion of local tax bases, increased tourism, jobs associated with parks, attraction and retention of businesses, crime reduction, and whereas national park units ensure the ecological beauty of our communities and provide places for families, children, and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors, and whereas the National Park Service manages 3 units in Pima County, Saguaro National Park, Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument, and Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail, that are on ancestral lands of the Tohono O'odham and Pascua Yaqui people, and administers the Santa Cruz Valley National Heritage Area. Now therefore be it resolved that the Pima County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the week of April 24th through April 30th to be National Park Service Week in Pima County, and encourages our residents to learn more about our national park sites, and invites residents and visitors to get out and enjoy their outstanding national features. Thank you so much for being here. Do you want to talk a little bit about National Park Service Week, or anything that
Sure.
you want to do?
Well, I'd just like to thank the board for the recognition, and whether it's a national park or a local park in your community or county or state park, it provides a great opportunity for the community to get outdoors and connect with nature, but also our natural and cultural history of the area. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. ¿Quieres estar en español? No? Okay. I think we're done. Thank you.
right, we're going to move on to call to the public. Want to remind everybody you have 3 minutes. Abide by the rules of civility, or we will turn off your mic. And with that, Stephanie Kirk. Stephanie Kirk?
Hi, I hope everybody had great holidays. I'm unfortunate I couldn't make it to the last one. I really wanted to. I wanted to address what Alita said about the photos that were on her social media. She had a comment that she was maskless because she tested. The normal people don't have the money to go get tested every time they want to do an event. Not everybody can be connected to the elite for the PCR testing. With that being said, Matt Hines, I'm not sure where he went, but I wanted to discuss with him how he's interrupted me when I was speaking. He's always gone every single time I show up. He said that anybody who doesn't take the vaccine and should be charged with murder. If you are a doctor and you're telling your patients not to get the vaccine, which is literally experimental, then you should be charged with murder. You shouldn't be allowed to have interactions in society. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen that HB 2616 was passed in the Senate, which means that schools, businesses can't force masks on children that are 18 and below. I'd like to see that go with 18 and up. When you wear a mask,
Ma'am, I'm just going to interrupt briefly. You need to face the board when you're
I would like to face everybody, but you know what, Ms. Sharon?
Board.
You guys don't always make eye contact. And in fact, when you're sitting here telling people how to be polite, the people on your board can't be present, nor can they stop interrupting. Matt's back there getting a drink. And he can't listen to anyone talk. So let me make eye contact with who I want to make eye contact with, and you do the same. Just like if I want to breathe, I'll breathe. So HB 2616.
turn off her mic. Thank you.
Well, I have the photos of Adelita maskless. If anybody wants them, I'm sure she's got a reason as to why you were maskless. Coercion is against the law. And you guys just don't want to hear the medical study that I have to say.
Ma'am, you're out of order. I'm going to ask if you continue that you be removed from the board. Okay, Bruce Hamilton.
That was really rude.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Hamilton. I currently serve as the chairman of an all-volunteer organization called Tucson Veterans Serving Veterans. We take care of the veteran in need population here in Tucson and Pima County. I come to you this morning with grave concerns over a recent appointment by this board. I read a month ago that Deborah Martinez had been appointed as a constable to Precinct 8. And as her previous employer, I'd like an opportunity to share with you our experience with dealing with Constable Martinez. Please check her resume to verify her time period that I'm speaking about today. I'd like to address her lack of character and her lack of judgment. The items that I will address are petty, malicious, and vindictive examples of her behavior and how over the course of 1 year she was able to do the damage that she did to our organization. The same person now will be able to make judgment calls on what affects citizens of Pima County. The same person will now be documenting her interactions with the citizens of Tucson. Many of the items I will mention today address her willingness to falsify documents and tell untruths, okay? We hired her on May 6th of 2019, and it was the worst year of our lives. Within 1 month, she had done an order of protection on our board, our chairman of our board, and kicked him out of our organization over an argument that she had with him over just a minor situation. By April of the next year, our board was done with her. We wanted to be done with her. We discharged her by July 15th, and within an hour of her termination, we were notified by our Facebook administrator she had blocked all access to our accounts. She locked us out of all of our Dropbox accounts, locked all of our computers, mobile phone, Facebook, and all of our passwords to all of our TVSV accounts, technically shutting us down for 60 days. TVA has lost a year of data, electronic application forms, all of our functional files from mid-2019 to 20. She also would not return a laptop that she has. Okay? 1 month after 5 days after we discharged her, I get an EEO complaint at my employer over how I treated her, and I had to go through an HR background check on myself over an EEO complaint over an employee that I had in another organization, not even associated with my employer. If that tells you what kind of person this is. Then by August of that year, she did a Department of Labor a complaint against us and tried to get $4,100 more out of us for a part-time employee for 32 hours a week. She wanted $4,100 more. She wanted 1,000 miles for her car, to drive her car, a part-time employee. Sorry for that. I apologize for it again. By December, that had already been worked out. Here we are now, 14 months later from that determination. She's already proved that she's told untruths in federal and state organization documents, and she caused fraud, and she seeks revenge. I speak today because she will have the power of the badge. I speak today because she will do no wrong. She can write the reports that she wants people to see, and she can pick her winners and losers. Thank you for being here today. I hope this information provides today hope of a future situation that comes up with this employee. I look forward to her campaign next year. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Keith Van Huygen.
Good morning. My name is Keith Van Huygen, and I'm dressed as a Droog. A Droog you see from Clockwork Orange. That's where we're at. You see, I've been coming here for, 17 years, talking in front of this board, in front of the city council, in front of TUSD. And, oh man, I am so not impressed with our latest batch of people. The last 2 years, you have offended every thinking person in this county. You've violated our civil rights. You've spent money like it's water. Chuck Huckleberry was a disease, a con man, a thief, and most of the board majority for most of the last 30 years let him get away with it. There are times, like now, when someone says Sharon Bronson is a racist, and I laugh, because I've been here watching former board members calling it out. Look up the videos, you'll get a laugh. I've been doing this for decades, people. Maybe you should listen to somebody besides who the hell you've been listening to. Matt, I kind of feel sorry for you. You're a doctor. You're so specialized. Your thinking patterns, what you do, who you know, is so confined. Get out there. Come to one of my open forge days on a Saturday. Meet some Republicans, meet some Christians, meet some not Christians. Yeah, we talk. We laugh. We mock you for your lack of intellect. We mock you, but dang, we rage. And profanity, oh, this would be so colorful. I have friends that make your toes curl, and we're not the minority. I want to see some investigations. I want to see people in jail. And the media, well, you're to blame too, because you never ask a single question. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Drew Heaton.
Honorable Pima County Supervisors, my name is Drew Heaton, Chairman for the Libertarian Party of Pima County. The Libertarian Party is opposed to the adoption of voting centers and e-poll books in Pima County. The elimination of pre-printed ballots for each precinct permitting voters to vote at any vote center will make voter fraud easier to perpetuate and more difficult to detect. Arizona Senate Bill 1120 suggested a series of security measures which could increase ballot security and make all Pima County voters more confident in our election integrity. Some of those suggested ballot security measures could be implemented at very low cost. Utilizing distinctive ballot paper with a Pima County watermark and serialized ballot paper which could track ballots at each voting center would also increase confidence. Keeping private the status of individual voters, whether they have chosen to vote or abstain in any given election, until after the polls have closed, would increase confidence in our elections. Making the voting status of individual voters available to the media, campaigns, or political parties prior to the close of the polls is not just a violation of voter privacy. It could be seen as an invitation to intimidate those who have not yet voted or even to cast fraudulent votes or ballots on their behalf. Secure ballot paper would make a creation of fraudulent ballots much more difficult. Additionally, might I add, Madam Chair, that you and I have a bit of history of which most here and many listening are unaware. When in 2016-17, I initially became involved in politics as a reluctant yet angry activist. You and I have often not seen eye to eye, but through that experience, you have proved to be gracious and forgiving. So I find it incredulous that your valid concerns about this issue have slandered you as a racist simply because of the color of your skin. I speak for many. We know that that is not the truth. I am sorry. The integrity of our elections is important to all voters in Pima County. Distinguished board members, thank you for your consideration.
And now our final speaker, Dan Wan. One more.
Good morning, board. Again, we got a full house. Nice to see you all. So 3 things I want to talk about. One is thank you for doing the paws and all that. I think that's really good. I don't know if you have recognized the other private rescues that are going on here in Tucson. There are quite a few dogs in that. So if you are doing that, that's fantastic, but it would also be good to know how many dogs are we talking, how many cats, how many animals, because that's a big deal. And I know one rescue I'm familiar with, they have over 80 dogs that they're dealing with, so that's a big deal. Number 2 is thank you as a board dealing with the Tucson water issue. That is, Tucson is being a bully to Pima County, trying to force a 10% increase in rates on us. Thank you for standing up for that. I continue to encourage you to do that. Lastly, I want to talk about, on the flip side, how the county is treating us as citizens. You're being bullies to us. You're standing up to the county. We are standing up to you because you're not listening to us, save one. And you've heard it here today. You're not listening. You need to listen to us, open forum, talk about what we're talking about the controversies that's dividing this county. It is huge. You're allowing it to go. You're allowing it to continue. People are very upset. We need to stop that. Again, there's one supervisor here. Thank you, Supervisor Christie, for standing up and speaking out. We need to continue that. You guys need to listen and act. Open forum, open discussion, town hall, whatever it is, we can get it out, get the experts to talk about what's going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we actually do have one more speaker, Ernest. I think it's Graves. Welcome.
Oh, excuse me, go ahead. My name is Ernie Graves. I've lived here all my life. I just wanted to come down and say a few words of appreciation for Chuck Huckleberry, all the work that he's put in, all of the manipulations and long-term thinking and credits that he probably won't get for a while, but thought he's been a tremendous asset to the county and to Southern Arizona. I met with different people out of Washington. I had tremendous respect out of a lot of people in Washington, and I don't know what happened. I think it's a very tough break, but I do think that the county in southern Arizona owes Chuck a lot of appreciation and thankfulness for what he's done in shaping the county and the long-term trends. I met him when he was in high school. He's always been focused, and he's always looked out for who he's working with and who he's working for. So I don't want to spend too much more time with you guys, but I do appreciate Chuck, all the work that he's put in and the shaping and things that he's brought to this county that will last for years and years and years. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
may I have a point of personal privilege, please?
Proceed.
This incident we just had with the speaker being cut off at the mic was uncalled for and unnecessary. There was no warning to her at the beginning that she could not speak and turn to the audience. She did not know that. She felt frustrated that she doesn't get the attention of this board. This is the third time she's been summarily shut off and shut down from speaking. I know it's not pleasant to hear criticism. I've served on this board 5 years, and God knows I've had my share of criticism, but this is the most essential and most important part of our process, where any citizen can speak about anything to their elected officials face to face, no matter how unpleasant it is. And this board needs to understand that that is the key essential ingredient to our democracy. And if there's an opportunity for a bit of leniency and a bit of accommodation, because folks come down here during their day to speak, they should be allowed to speak uninterrupted. And I would urge the chair and this board to give such speakers as we saw earlier today their attention, and to include them in the conversation rather than shutting them out. And I hope that this kind of an incident doesn't happen again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I am going to take the next item out of order as we move on to the agenda. I'm going to move to item 15, unfinished business, from 3:15:22 to 4:5:22, initial court appearances. We have both the judge from City Court and the presiding judge from Pima County Court, Superior Court here. And then I think Mr. Feynman is here. He will be leaving his position as public defender before our next meeting, and he wished to address us on this item. Mr. Feynman, are you available?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I watched with interest the entire agenda item from 2 weeks ago on this, and I asked several of you if I could be heard just to add some data that I think will be very helpful for your future discussions. And I'm going to memorialize all of this in a memo, so you don't have to worry about writing it down. When somebody is arrested, they have an initial appearance within 12 hours. Sometimes they have just felonies, sometimes they have just misdemeanors, sometimes they have both. When they are held in jail, they can be held on just the felony or just the misdemeanor or both. I respectfully disagree with a lot of the speakers from 2 weeks ago. I do not think the issue is that the judges who preside over initial appearances lack criminal experience. They have tremendous criminal experience. And I disagree that the problem is pretrial services. I think pretrial services does incredible work under very challenging conditions. What my department sees as the problem, or one of the problems, is that people are being held on misdemeanors. These are the lowest level offenses. With the exception of domestic violence, these offenses are not violent. They are often misdemeanors for failing to appear in court, which means that people are being held in jail because they did not show up in court 2 weeks ago, 2 months ago, on a very, very, very low-level misdemeanor. Not a violent crime, not one that involves any victims. After watching the meeting 2 weeks ago, I actually tracked all of the data between 2 weeks ago and today. And in the last 2 weeks, there have been 109 people held on misdemeanor warrants. Forget about the felonies, forget about the crimes involving victims. There have been 109 people held in Pima County Jail on misdemeanor warrants who I don't know anybody believes need to be there. Some of them have been held on felonies and misdemeanors. Many have been held on just misdemeanors. There is a staggering cost to this. The current booking fee at the Pima County Jail for the first 24 hours is $422. For every person held at the Pima County Jail, the taxpayers pay 422 hours for the first day and $123 for each additional day. So those people that Tucson Police Department arrests on misdemeanors, those people that Tucson City Court judges hold on misdemeanors, we are paying $422 just to have them booked into the jail. I think part of the issue, and I in no way mean to disparage the court, is that when a Tucson City Court judge issues a warrant because one of our clients fails to appear, the other Tucson City Court judge who has initial appearances feels duty-bound to honor that warrant. They do not want to overrule their colleagues on the bench. I think it is an understandable bias, but it is a bias nonetheless. And so we see the issue as Tucson City Court judges, or part of the issue, understandably not wanting to release people on low-level misdemeanor offenses that their colleagues ask them to hold on low-level misdemeanor offenses. In order to put a dent in the jail population, and in order to improve initial appearances, we do not even have to talk about people accused of felonies. We do not have to talk about people who are accused of a crime involving a victim. We can focus in on these people who are just being held on low-level misdemeanor offenses. I propose, and I respectfully request, that this board extend the contract for 1 year only, that in that 1 year contract extension, it include rigid and rigorous data collection requirements. We need to collect data on which judges are holding defendants. We need to require them to describe why they are holding the defendant. There's only about 3 or 4 reasons, so that is not an onerous task. It can be a checkbox. We need to break it down to see who is being held just on misdemeanors and who is being held just on felonies. One proposed solution, because I like to come in front of you all with solutions and not just problems. Remember that $420 booking fee I described and that $123 daily usage fee. This board has it within its power, I believe, to increase those prices to the city of Tucson for people being held on low-level, nonviolent misdemeanors. For example, you could determine, and you could say to the city of Tucson, if you want to use our jail to hold people on low-level, nonviolent misdemeanors, fine. You're going to pay 500% more every day. You can even make carve-outs. You can say that doesn't apply to people accused of domestic violence. You can say that doesn't apply to people accused of DUI. You can make any carve-out you want. But if you really want to use our jail to hold people that don't belong there, you're going to pay a lot more than you're paying now. Over the last 2 weeks, 109 people have been held. That has cost, under the current rates, the people of Pima County $11,836. If you jack that by 500%, it would cost the city of Tucson $17,220. And if that's not enough, you can raise it by another 100, 200%. I think providing a financial disincentive for the city of Tucson to use the Pima County Jail to hold people in jail who don't belong there is a very, very valuable tool at your disposal. I would just like to add 1 or 2 more points that'll be very quick, if I may. This is my last board meeting. Dean Brault, the head of Public Defense Services, is here. I strongly recommend that Mr. Brault or somebody who works for him be included on all meetings in which criminal justice issues are discussed. In the last 2 weeks when this issue was discussed, through no fault of yours, there were multiple prosecutors and ex-prosecutors, and there was the chief of police. There was nobody from the defense bar. We are half the criminal justice system. So I do think that our voice and the voice of our clients, we represent them. The prosecutors and the police do not. Our voice and the voice of our clients should be heard. And I think that Mr. Brault or somebody that he chooses should at least be available to answer your questions, if you have any, anytime a criminal justice issue is presented in front of you. Finally, it has been the greatest privilege and greatest honor of my life to serve you all and to serve the citizens of Pima County. I was here almost exactly 5 years ago when you appointed me, and that was the culmination of all of my professional hopes, and I cannot thank you enough. I cannot thank Ms. Lesher enough for all of her support. There have been scurrilous rumors that one of the reasons that I'm retiring is because Ms. Lesher took over as county administrator. That could not be further from the truth. I have had a fantastic relationship with her. She has been an incredible supporter of myself personally and of public defense services, and I am absolutely convinced that with Ms. Lesher, with Mr. Brault, Pima County and people who face criminal charges in Pima County are being left in the best of hands. And I'm going to sit down or take your questions before I cry, because mic drop, Joel out.
Yeah. No, and you actually made Ms. Lesher smile. I haven't seen her smile in 2 weeks, so thank you for that. Any questions for Mr. Feynman?
I'm happy to talk about, give you more data on initial appearances or describe it if you'd like.
You said you're going to give us a memo.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Feynman. I got
Thank
some
you.
questions.
Thank you.
And then I don't know if, my colleagues, if you've read the memo we got from, or letter we got from Laura Conover, our current county attorney. She'd asked that this item be continued until our meeting in May. So we have the judges here, Mr. Broad's here, and if there are no questions for them, what's the pleasure of the board on this item? Do you want to continue it?
Chair Bronson, I'd like to go ahead and continue the item. We don't have a document to look at or to tweak, and I'd prefer not to do that on the dais.
So for the first meeting in May?
That sounds, if that works out.
Second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, we'll continue this item then to our first meeting in May. Looking forward to the memo from Mr. Feynman. Want to thank former Deputy County Attorney for being here. And we'll continue this conversation.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. I really appreciated when Ms. Conover was here 2 weeks ago that she indicated that it was her intent to work with all stakeholders moving forward on this issue. That's one of the reasons that I'm willing to continue the item. I know that she's been in contact with her colleagues at Superior Court so that they have the opportunity to discuss and review what she is proposing. I really appreciate what Mr. Feynman said about the necessity of all members of the bar being represented when the board is discussing this issue. And I also would prevail upon the folks in the county attorney's office to include in whatever they discuss with us in 2 weeks some more robust definitions of the data to be collected if this board were to extend the IGA for an additional year, which was suggested by Mr. Feynman just now and has been suggested by other speakers in previous appearances before the board. We did get some good suggestions on data collection. I think all of my colleagues received the communication from Ms. Kramer, and I forwarded that communication to Ms. Conover and members of her staff, because I think that is something that the board is going to need to have if we're going to make informed decisions about this IGA moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I concur. We need a vote now. There was motion to continue till our first meeting in May. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. We'll return to the regular order of our agenda now. Moving to Board of Supervisors, sitting as other boards. We have an executive session item, but it's not ripe at the moment, so we're going to be moving on to item 7 on the regular agenda, contract under flood control. I'll move the item.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to the Board of Supervisors, sitting as a Library District Board, item 8, I'll move that item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We now move on to item 9. We're now sitting as the Board of Supervisors. Now we look at the approval of the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to divide the question?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
I'd like to divide the question and pull item 2 and item 7.
Items 2 and 7. Okay. Any other, nobody else wants to divide the question?
I was going to pull item 2, so. I think
Okay,
we're-
so we're, items 2 and 7 then, we'll vote on separately. I'll move the remainder of the consent.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 2, Child Parent Centers Amendment Number 1. I'll move the item.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Both Supervisor Grijalva and Supervisor Christie put this item on. Supervisor Christie, you wanted this pulled?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The purpose of this particular item is the county is retroactively changing the primary funding source for PEEP from the general fund to the American Rescue Plan. Initially, this board approved $10 million out of a total of $30 million, but originally was $10 million to provide funding for this Child Parent Center. My first question is the original $10 million that is now being replaced through the PEEP plan, is that being returned to the general fund?
Ms. Lesser?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, excuse me, yes.
It is, thank you. And that funding now is being charged to ARPA?
Supervisor Christie, yes, it was part of the plan as delineated and approved by the board December of last year that shows that reallocation to the ARPA funds at that time. And this is simply identifying that in the contracts.
And Madam Chair and Ms. Lesher, what happens when the ARPA funding is no longer available? What is the plan on the funding at that point?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there has been discussion over the last several years about relocating the ongoing funding for this out of the library district. Legislation was passed that allows for education programs to be provided through the tax base in the library department and the library tax funds. And we have looked at how we can migrate this as an ongoing program to be funded at the discretion of the board by the library department.
So at this particular point, the original $10 million has or will be being returned to the general fund, and the ARPA funds will supplant it?
The funds will be returned to the general fund. It will be funded by ARPA as long as there is, for the remainder of the funding program of ARPA, and then we will come to the board to move that to the library district funding.
And do we have an idea how long the ARPA funding is to last?
Supervisor Christie, 2 years through 24.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Supervisor Grijalva, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair Bronson. My question is, we've been really hoping that there was going to be some sort of sliding scale. So working families, a single mom that makes $35,000 a year wouldn't qualify under the current the current systems that are in place as far as the requirements. And so I'm wondering if this change to ARPA would cause any inability to create a sliding scale, because I know the general fund is more flexible than ARPA.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, I'd like to ask Nicole Fife, who is our point of contact on all things PEEP, to address that.
All things PEEP?
All things PEEP, to respond to that for you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, we consulted with GMI this morning to get a better understanding of what the constraints or flexibility may be with the use of the ARPA funding, and it appears that under a different category of which we're focusing on PEEPs right now, we could probably get up to about 300% federal poverty level, so family with incomes up to 300% as opposed to 200%. So just to give you an example, at 200%, a single parent with a child would have to make an income of $36,000 or under, and so up to 300% would probably go up to about $45,000 or under.
Okay.
So there's a bit of flexibility, probably not up to the 400%.
Right.
But a little bit.
Yeah, I think that what I've heard from a lot of the providers for childcare is that, you know, families with more than one child that are all preschool age, you know, $800 a month is kind of the average for preschool, and that's a hardship for, regardless of how much income you're making, let alone if you're, you know, struggling at around 40,000. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to look at that. So as long as there is some flexibility, that would be helpful. And even if there's a portion paid, and I'm not saying that completely free, because a lot of families want to contribute what they can, and that would also help us serve more families if we had 2 families paying half. Okay, so as long as that we still have some flexibility there to create that sliding scale, I can support this.
All right, there's a motion on the floor with a second to approve this item. Is there any objection?
I object.
One objection, Supervisor Christie. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 7, I'll move the item. It's master agreement.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we go into item 7, I just wanted to make sure maybe I missed something. On the other items that we're not having any action on, were they completely approved for?
You mean the remainder of the consent? Yes.
It was done. Okay, thank you very much, Benjamin. This is more migrant mobility money that is being directed to a cab company, and it is, let's see here, this amendment is to AAA cab services, and it is the award of a master agreement to increase the award amount of $250,000 for a cumulative not-to-exceed contract amount of $500,000. And prior to this particular item, the amount that was designated for this same type of agreement to, make sure I read it, to provide safe transportation for asylum seekers from point to point within the greater Tucson metropolitan area. And this, again, was through a cab service that the money is being directed to. This same program prior to today was administered by the Community and Economic Development Department. Now this one is being administered by County Fleet Services. So County Fleet Services has now taken over this particular plan to provide transportation for asylum seekers, when prior to this, it was the Community and Economic Development. What is the motivation behind transferring the coverage and the administration of providing asylum seekers with cab service?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, let me go back again for a moment. This is part of the ongoing contracts that for which the county is funded fully by the federal government to assist with the movement of legal asylum seekers who are brought into our community by the Department of Homeland Security, various components, and then left to the responsibility of the county to assist with the continuation of that movement out of the community. One way we do that is when CBP or ICE or someone is dropping people either in street release or at one of our community facilities. Part of the responsibility provided by the federal government and funding is to get the individuals on to the next step. Is it a bus station? Is it the plane? Is it airport? Something like that. And we do work with the a variety of transportation services, primarily the cab service. It is the fleet department that has the best evaluation and understanding of what it is we're doing related to vehicles, transportation, and oversees all of the other transportation contracts in the county, and it was simply more appropriate to move within the auspices of Fleet Services, who run transportation contracts.
You, Madam Chair, Ms. Lesser, you spoke of funding coming from the federal government on these various programs, yet under the background it says that the funding is coming on this particular item from our own general fund.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, which is replaced by the federal funds. We've been providing regular reports to the board of all of the funds that we have been spending and how all of those have been reimbursed by the federal government through FEMA funds.
So the reimbursement will come from and be returned to the general fund on this particular item?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
There are no further discussion. I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection, Supervisor Christie. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. Now, I'm going to move again, once out of order, going on to the addendum agenda, item 9, the appointment of public defender. Staff is recommending the appointment of Megan Page as Pima County Public Defender. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none. And so now, Joel, you can leave. You can exit stage left. Bonne chance.
Nice.
All right. We're now going to
Did we
move.
vote?
Oh, I thought we did. Did we vote?
No, we did a motion in a second.
There were no objections.
I know, I wanted to be able to say yes, because she's sitting
Oh,
here. We
okay,
wanted to,
okay.
you know, it's a celebration.
Okay. Sorry. All right. Let's move on then.
Congratulations.
Yes, yes, you've got some interesting shoes to fill. All right, let's move then for a time certain. We'd scheduled item 4 on the addendum agenda. Let's move on to that. Supervisor Christie, you placed this item on the agenda.
I did, Madam Chair, thank you. As we approach this issue, we know that our community has been involved in quite a bit of turmoil as to the revelation that Mr. Huckleberry retired on July 4th of 2021, changing his status from county administrator to a contractor. Obviously, it took this board by surprise. There was no notification by Mr. Huckleberry. I did ask that folks from Human Resources and Payroll Department, should they so be available, would be able to attend today's meeting along with Mr. Huckleberry's attorneys to comment upon that. But I think the most salient area to begin the questioning of this is Ms. Lesher's April 15th memorandum entitled County Administrator Retirement and Resignation Records. And I want to quote part of that memorandum from Ms. Lesher that says, "Here is what I know," I being Ms. Lesher, "here is what I know about Mr. Huckleberry's decision to receive retirement benefits and continue working as county administrator under the terms of his contract. Mr. Huckleberry notified ASRS of his intent to retire in the ASRS system, and his retirement was effective July 4th, 2021. It states that this was one of the items you knew of, Ms. Lesher. One thing that's not in this sentence is the idea of when did you know this?
Sorry, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I do not recall exactly when I knew. It was sometimes after July.
After July 4th?
Yes.
Sometime you knew, and that was the approximate time period when you knew of this? After July?
Yes, sir.
And how did you find out?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, Mr. Huckleberry told me.
Mr. Huckleberry told you that he had done this?
Mr. Huckleberry told me that he had drawn down his retirement benefits and was planning to do that. And I do want to be clear that it does not, there is a difference between drawing down his retirement benefits and retiring from Pima County. And that he has, as an employee, activated the ability to access retirement benefits through the state for which he was eligible that did not affect either the wording of his contract or the fact that he was the full-time county administrator.
Well, Madam Chair, the issue, of course, is the fact that this caught this board and many others in Pima County completely by surprise. So we're really not in a position where we're talking about the legality or illegality of what Mr. Huckleberry did. We're talking about how the process evolved and what the result of his actions did as far as the transparency, the trust, where we can put our faith in our administrators and community leaders. So he told you he was going to. Did he tell you when he did?
Supervisor Christie, he told me he had done so.
He told you he had done so. So prior to that, he never told you he was going to.
He did not.
Okay. Would you have been in a better or a more transparent position or a more comfortable position had he told you that he had done this?
Supervisor Christie, it was his right to draw down on those retirement benefits. We have some 500 employees today in Pima County who are county employees who also access retirement benefits. It is part of the retirement system. It is something that is his, it is his personal financial arrangement with the state and with his years of service with Pima County, and it is frankly part of his relationship with you all as members of the board.
Well taken as far as his relationship with the board, which we were completely left in the dark on, and that's why we're trying to look at reasons why this shouldn't happen again and how we can prevent it from happening again. You said that there are some 500 other employees who are doing the same. There's no other employee in Pima County that's being paid the pay plan that Mr. Huckleberry does, so I don't think to drop him in with this large pool of other employees is a fair thing to do because of the magnitude of the situation here. Going along further with your memorandum, it says, Mr. Huckleberry instructed his chief executive assistant, Monica Perez, who is now my chief of staff, to work with the finance and risk management and human resources to ensure compliance with ASRS. Going back again, Mr. Huckleberry instructed my chief executive assistant, Monica Perez, to ensure compliance with ASRS. When did he instruct her to ensure compliance?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I do not know the dates of that action. I know that as Mr. Huckleberry began to draw down or had access to and availability to draw down his benefits, his concern apparently was that it be done in accordance with all legal authority and with the adherence to his contract, and his direction was to make sure that all was done legally.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last few words.
Legal. His direction to his assistant was to make sure that everything that was done legally and in accordance with the provisions of his contract and the requirements of the Arizona Revised ASRS.
And in according to his direction, were all those requirements met?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is my understanding that they were all met.
And is that Ms. Perez's discretion to determine if they were met or not?
She was working to ensure that they were, and I believe in that they're in. I have no reason to believe that anything was not done in accordance with all of those rules and regulations. We also have, while I have asked our Director of HR and Finance to be here today, I want to be clear that these are individuals who also as part of what they do, are adhere to a variety of standards of confidentiality regarding not only this employee, but every employee. We have employees across the county for which these individuals have access to confidential information, and I rely on them heavily not to share with me or with the board or with others if there are specifics about your withholding or any other employee's withholding, and I appreciate their confidentiality. One of the reasons I was not involved was that Mr. Huckleberry was working directly with personnel from ASRS, as well as the individual specifically designated to ensure that what was done was in accordance, again, with the requirements of ASRS, the law, and his contract.
So when these items were presented to ASRS, they were done with the knowledge of HR and payroll?
Yes.
And did HR and payroll approve the changes to Mr. Huckleberry's contract as being in compliance?
And to be clear, Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, while they do not have necessarily a subjective cut on this, when you asked did they approve it, it was not a question of, it is simply a do they line up with and are they in accordance with requirements of ASRS, the law, and his contract.
And do we know when those accordances were met by those both those departments?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't have that in front of me. I'm sure that we do, because they would have had to all have been crosswalked and approved in order for him to begin to receive whatever retirement benefits he did receive.
Crosswalked and approved by who?
The individuals who make sure that his payroll check and that what is we've received from ASRS is correct.
And those individuals are located where?
They work within within finance and payroll department.
County's finance and payroll
Yes, sir.
department. And what kind of assurance do we know, or does the board know, that all of those elements were proper and properly executed?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is a function of payroll and the department who are regularly audited by a variety of individuals, including the state, to ensure that everything that is done for every employee who retires or makes modifications to their payroll system is done in accordance with all of the changes requested by the employee or by ASRS or by any other legal accommodation. And as I say, there are numerous external auditors that come into play to ensure that that is done correctly.
And these individuals, are they managers, or are they in charge, or do they answer to other managers? Do they get approval from their superiors that this was done properly?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there are checks and balances within the system. There was not someone necessarily within the organization reviewing each of those changes. There are changes that come in for employees every single day when you work with an organization of 7,000 employees.
Moving on with your memorandum, Ms. Perez he instructed a limited number of staff to closely hold this information. Who are the limited number of staff, and what information did they closely hold?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't know the names of those specific individuals. They may be within the documents, but I think that it is personal financial information, and it is personal information relating to what Mr. Huckleberry was able to access through his state retirement system. And as such personal financial information, there was not a desire for it to be widely known.
Because?
It was his personal financial information.
And going back to his instruction that a limited number of staff closely hold this information, and Ms. Perez did as she was instructed, when was she instructed?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't know the date of that. It would have been, I know that she worked closely with Mr. Huckleberry as he walked through the various elements of his, when he began to access his retirement funds.
Moving on to another item along the same lines, Madam Chair, the ASRS member retirement timeline and checklist is kind of a boxes type of deal where you make notes that you've approved or at least complied with the process of retirement. One of the requirements is a 10 to 14, that after 10 to 14 days of retiring, that the applicant or the employee has to verify with your employer that the ending payroll verification form was submitted online to the ASRS. It says verify with your employer. We are the employers of Mr. Huckleberry. We were never given verification of this. What is your response to this lack of employee notification to their employer?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the forms that are required through the state require notification to Pima County as the employer, not to the 5 individual members of the Board of Supervisors. The notice was provided to Pima County.
And who are the employers? Who would the employers in Pima County be?
As I understand, there is the paperwork that comes back from ASRS returns into, I believe it's the payroll department.
I have to point out, I'm seeing a trend here that between payroll and human resources, as well as ASRS, there are a lot of available times or instances where an employee can maybe make a notification of some change, but is under no responsibility to advise or illuminate any kind of body or organization or department that this change is taking place. Why is that?
Supervisor Christie, what I can tell you is I believe what you have seen, what we have begun to indicate is that while information can come into HR, again, in a confidential basis because of the employee, what we have done, if you've seen in the last 2 weeks, is begin to provide a report to every member of the Board of Supervisors and to the other deputy county administrators indicating each and every individual who has left the employment or somehow changed their employment status with Pima County. I'm not in a position to go backwards on what may have occurred under a different administration. I can tell you that what we are recognizing is where the teachable moments that we can use to move a system forward and to provide, we hope, additional transparency for the public and for the board. And that's what we've been looking at is what is it we need to do. And that's why you've begun to get those reports. We've had some communication with other board members that would asking for a little more granularity about the reports of what's happened to each and every employee and how they change their employment status, and those will continue to be provided to the board.
But do you acknowledge the situation as far as the lack of trust and transparency and the appearance of secretiveness and behind closed doors and lack of communication and arbitrary action by the most highly paid employee in Pima County? Can you acknowledge that there are inherent issues with the system that need to be addressed, and we're not, and that's why we are where we are today?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, what I'd like to do is bifurcate that a bit and say that I believe that there are issues related to each and every county employee for which the system was developed, and that we are going to continue to maintain the strictest confidentiality regarding those employees. What is separate from that is your issue and the question before you today. Have we continued to deal with the county administrator, the highest paid employee in the county, as if he or she were part of that overall structure? And we have been responding to that individual in the same way. And I believe that it is accurate and appropriate that we bifurcate the issue and that provide a different standard of transparency to all of you and to the public regarding the employees for which you are directly responsible as the County Board of Supervisors.
And would it not be appropriate that there was some personnel files or forms filled out, that we could have a paper trail to acknowledge that these steps were taken and to who they were delivered to? There seems to be no kind of accountability regarding any kind of signatures or documentation or anything along these lines?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, again, I'm more than happy to work with the board to continue to expand what we hope we've already started in terms of transparency, documentation on a go-forward basis. What has occurred in the past, again, I'm going to continue to say that I hope that we maintain confidentiality and respect such as it relates to each and every county employee. And regarding whatever their individual withholdings might be or what their actions might be, I think that there is an ability for us to have a broad look at the Board of Supervisors and for the entire community. If people are leaving and in certain departments, that's a good management tool for us to have. Would you like all to have very different ways in which you evaluate and look at each and every piece of paper that involves me going forward, or whoever's your county administrator? I absolutely believe that's appropriate, and I'm happy to work with all of you to instate that.
Well, as you were a part of the previous administration, I'm certain you would not put any kind of a situation to play where this type of unannounced changes to your pay plan or previous pay plans would come apparent. In other words, you're not going to be in a position where this type of system of changes in very important areas of a pay plan are going to take place without at least notification and illumination?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I'd end the sentence earlier. It's not going to take place.
Moving to my final area, in the process of going through these items, we came across a series of charges Mr. Huckleberry made. Looks like Indian jewelry in certain locations.
Wiki up.
At various times, purchases of, looks like $2,000. There's more of $2,500 and $2,580.
Madam Chair.
All kinds of
I just wanted to ask my colleague how this is related to the item as posted on the agenda. It seems like we're diverting from it.
No, I'd be glad to make that connection. This happened after Mr. Huckleberry retired. So he is now a contractor, and he's charging, obviously, personal items with a county P card to the tune of almost just under $7,800 of personal items on his P card. Does a contractor get a P card?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I would like to respond to the issue that for those of you who have been over to our gift shop, we sell a variety of issues of jewelry items as well as pottery items that came from Mexico. As we began opening the gift shop, we did so in COVID, and there was some very, very real challenges of supply chain. As some of you may know, Mr. Huckleberry travels regularly to Mexico, and he travels regularly to see family in Las Vegas. When he went to either of those points, he purchased items for the gift shop and did so either at the Wiki Up jewelry stores or in Mexico. There are all of the documentation that exists and all of the inventory and all of the audits that take place to show the receipt of every single one of those items by the department that now is selling those items in the gift shop, and he was reimbursed for being really the number one buyer for the gift shop for a period of time.
So he used the P card to buy inventory for the gift shop as a contractor.
Chair Bronson, again, Mr. Huckleberry drew down on his retirement benefits from the state. He did not retire from Pima County. So he was continuing to work under his contract with all of you. Any of the arrangements that they had and the conditions of his employment had not been altered.
And then I'm going to have to concur with Supervisor Scott. I think that question was out of order.
I'm done, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair Bronson, I just wanted to add, I think a lot of the concern and sort of the surprise came from the fact that this governing body doesn't get regular communications from HR that I am appreciating that we're receiving now. So when we have new hires, which is an opportunity to celebrate, when we have people that are retired, is separating from the county for whatever reason, those are things that we should be getting on a fairly regular basis, and so he would have been on the list. Do I agree that that is something that he should have communicated directly to us? Yes, the change in staff, but that is our responsibility. That wasn't clearly articulated in his contract, and so that's our fault. If should he have told us? I think he should have, but is that something that was required explicitly? No. So I do think that that is a learning opportunity for us. And I also think that, when we look at the communication that we have and the check and balance that we have with our county administrator, this is an opportunity for this board to work with Ms. Lesher to get that in line into what I think it would be a more equitable kind of balance. Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Grijalva, and I concur with your comments, and Supervisor Scott.
Thank you, and I appreciate also what Supervisor Grijalva just said. I have said the same publicly in recent days, that we should have been more explicit in the way that we crafted that contract. I also appreciate that Supervisor Christie began his remarks by saying that we were talking not about matters of legality or illegality, but process. And it certainly is jarring to hear the news that Mr. Huckleberry had applied for his retirement benefits in July from a member of the media. I don't think any of us were prepared for that, nor did we appreciate it, but the one person that we would like to ask about that situation is not here, and we're not able to ask him about it. But I do want to point to the memorandum that Supervisor Christie was quoting from earlier from Ms. Lesher from April 15th. The last sentence of that memorandum says, "The changes complied with all the rules and requirements of the Arizona State Retirement System, county policies, and Mr. Huckleberry's employment contract." So while the five of us are not happy with how we heard about this, what's important for the public to know is what's embedded in that last sentence. All the rules and requirements of the Arizona State Retirement System, county policies, and Mr. Huckleberry's employment contract were adhered to. What I think is also very important for the public to hear is that our employees acted with the greatest amount of professionalism and with respect for the privacy of Mr. Huckleberry as an employee. And so, again, I think it's appropriate to come back to the point that Supervisor Christie made at the beginning, which is that we're talking about process, not legality or illegality, and that we're certainly not questioning in any way the actions of any of our employees who performed with the integrity and professionalism that we expect from them in all instances. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. There are no further discussion.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
I appreciate the words of my colleagues. However, just by the line of questioning that I've undergone here, I think there are many more questions unanswered, and there's an attempt, I think, not to be fully forthcoming on a lot of issues, particularly who knew what and where and how, and who was involved in the whole process, and who has the knowledge of that process. We still don't know who that is. We still don't know who was brought into the fold not to divulge information. This does not lend itself well to the credibility of Pima County administration. It enhances skepticism and the lack of confidence in our administrative leaders. And I think that really what we need to know is what employees in what department at what time knew exactly what was going on. That, I believe, would be the most illuminating factor to do what seems to be kind of like, oh, well, we learned some lessons there, and it's no big deal, and let's just move on, and there's nothing to see here. He did everything according to the legal limits and everything, and did nothing wrong. But yet you talk to any thinking resident of Pima County, and they will tell you that they think something was up. And I don't think the questioning that we went through today clarifies that, and we have a lot of clarifying to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Scott.
it seems to me that if there are questions that are unanswered, it is because we are unable to pose them to Mr. Huckleberry, who may be the only person who can answer some of the questions that Supervisor Christie may have. What I think is important is that the public knows that the employees who continue to work for Pima County comported themselves with the greatest amount of professionalism and integrity in dealing with this matter. I've already said publicly that if Mr. Huckleberry were still our administrator, were still an employee of the county, that we would doubtless have some questions for him as a body, perhaps as individuals. We're not able to pose those questions. But I don't think I have any questions about how Ms. Lesher or anybody else in currently in county government comported themselves throughout this matter. And I think you can say it gives the impression of something was up, but provably there's no reason to make that assertion.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott, and once again, I concur with your remarks. And if there's no further discussion, we'll move on to our regular agenda, which brings us to item 10, approval process for modifications to line items for American Rescue Plan Act, coronavirus state and local fiscally recovery funds. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
I'm wondering if Pima County is allocating indirect for this.
Indirect costs?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, there are some, I hesitate because there are only some indirect costs are allowed on some of the items.
Right.
Only, and for those we are.
Okay, and then those indirect costs, are those centralized or are they?
They're centralized with, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Okay, no, that's fine. I'm just wondering, like, for example, the big ones for Pima County Health Department, they have their own finance, HR, like project managers supporting a lot of these initiatives. Is it coming central and then reallocated as needed, or how is that process working?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, the indirect costs revert to grants management and innovation and then can be allocated as needed to various departments.
Okay, can we get some information about the amount of indirect?
Absolutely.
And then if we can connect them to which of these are allowable. I know, like, capital costs, when we're purchasing, that doesn't have an indirect, but I'm just wondering about that. Because I know that a lot of this funding, while wonderful for Pima County, also puts some stressors on our systems. And so I know we've had to hire other people in order to be able to utilize this funding source. So I was just wondering about that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Basically, the item wants to have control or not have to bring items to the board unless there's a 10% overage of the original project bill. Is that my understanding?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this is actually asking for an opportunity to develop a process by which we can come to the board for approval. Under the federal regulations, while some have suggested that there is already a federal requirement for 10%, that is not what the federal requirements say. It allows for Treasury and others, it indicates that they may establish such a requirement. What we have attempted to do, because there's been an encouragement because of all of the various a lot of eyes on how we're spending federal dollars, as there should be. We have, in hopes of coming to full transparency, develop a process by which any of the allocation or the reallocation of the $203 million would come back to this board for approval. If we were to use the federal standard, it is a 10% requirement. We don't believe that coming to you for an overall change and saying anytime we change 20 million, it needs to come back to the board. We're looking for a way that provides greater transparency. What you have before you is then a way in which we've attempted to delineate by line items a way that we're not burdening this board by every time there might be a $10,000 change to come back to the board out of $203 million, but to find a process by which it is appropriate for you to look at the dollars that might be reallocated and not adhere to a federal standard that would only require your eyes on 20 million or more.
So it's not a matter of over, under?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Let's say the project projected cost is $10 million, but as things progress, it looks like the cost is going to increase as much as 10% over the original estimate. And is that the threshold where you want to bring it back to the board for approval?
Supervisor Christie, what we've done with this is say, rather than taking the $203 million and saying we have to come back to you anytime there's a change of $20 million or more, we have broken out programmatically a variety of areas that sometimes get down to a line item of 500,000, sometimes it's a couple of million, because we think it's more appropriate for the board and the public to have eyes on how you may be reallocating dollars in a way that makes sense rather than just in $20 million buckets. When we look at each of those items, we're then recognizing that we hope there'd be a 10% cost of that, and it would be either over or under. Any change or modification of 10% of that item, if it's more than the 500,000, would come to the board.
Madam Chair, I would like to amend this threshold of 10% down to 5%, because many of these programs, if you're talking about an $8 or $10 million program, 10% is substantial, but 5% can really impact a program. So it would be my desire that that threshold to bring it back to the board be reduced to 5% over the project.
You didn't make a motion, and you don't have any concurrence.
Would that be in the form of a motion?
You can do a substitute motion.
I would like to do a substitute motion to ensure that if there's any overruns or expansion of costs of a given project, that the threshold that is brought back to the board for approval is reduced from 10% to 5%.
Is there a second?
Madam Chair, I'll second it just for discussion purposes, because I want to refer back to the memorandum we got associated with this item.
Okay. Supervisor Scott.
If you go to the memorandum from administration that's attached to this item, and you go down to the fifth bullet under the background section, it says, quote, 10% principle established in the uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards that permits federal award recipients to make budget changes up to 10% of their overall award budget without having to procure official approval from the federal funders. So it sounds to me as if the 10% threshold was one that was very much aligned with federal requirements.
Correct.
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor Grijalva.
So the budget, the list and the modifications that are attached at the bottom of the memo, this is through the end of the ARPA funding through 2024?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, yes.
So is there any way that we can get this so it's a per fiscal year basis? Because if you look at PEEPS, for example, it says 30,000 or 30 million, and then it wouldn't come to the board unless we hit a $3 million mark, but that is an allocation that is 10 million annually. So it makes sense to me if this is something that we look at it per annual basis, not through the life of ARPA. Just because 3 million out of, if we make significant changes in 1 year, it wouldn't come to the board until we hit a $3 million kind of threshold. So I would think that it would make sense for this to be on an annual basis, like per fiscal year, and then this allocation would say, through the life of ARPA, we would allocate 30 million. That makes sense to me, but I would prefer to get this broken out, and 10% in that case would be low, but I understand that that's what the CAFR is recommending, and so I'm fine with that. But I just thought that made more sense to me than doing the life of the funding source.
Sure. Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, we're happy to bring that back, if you would like to continue the item and see how we can break that out for annual consideration.
Yeah, and even if we do it like, year 1, year 2, however we set it up, and then that's the total, I appreciate knowing that that's the dedication of funding. And the other thing is that if there is an opportunity to reallocate in some of the line items that we haven't expended the full amount, that makes sense, especially if you have a need in another area of the county, for us to be able to see that sort of breakdown financially on an annual basis. Makes more sense to me. Thanks.
Okay, we had a substitute motion on the table. Let's do a roll call on that one.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
No.
Supervisor Hines?
No.
Supervisor Scott?
No.
Chair Bronson?
No. By your vote, nay vote of 4-1, motion fails. We're back to the original motion.
Can we?
And then you can do the direction, if you want it on a...
I'm happy to approve the item, but I would like to see it broken out per fiscal year, and then any modifications. I mean, I think some of it might be discretionary, though, because some of these amounts are fairly small. So when you break them out by year, we might want to look and see if you may want to decide that you do it by category, like Pima County Workforce Development, Pima County Health Department, if you've broken it out by annual. Would it make more sense for us to consider this item in 2 weeks? Or how would you like to?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Grijalva, what I'm hearing is we want to continue with the 10%, but simply reallocate on the number on which the 10% is based, and that can be by year or by program. If you'd like to go ahead and just approve the 10%, we can come back with a work product. We're also happy to continue it, or approve this as step 1, and then perhaps we can come back in 2 weeks for final adoption of the plan.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move the item.
Well, what's moved?
The entire item, and then they're going to bring back the work product so we can look at it.
Yeah, right.
The 10%.
Yeah, right. So there was a motion to approve.
Yes.
And a second. So, and then...
Did you move the item?
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry, then I seconded. No wonder you were looking at me like, what are you doing? I just did it. Yeah, motion is second.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor. Let's do a roll call.
Madam Chair, would some of the concerns that Supervisor Grijalva is bringing up be addressed each year during the annual budgeting process?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, this relates primarily to how it is we're reporting and what reallocations you might be making, and I'm afraid that we might have a request for a reallocation that would not be concurrent with the annual budget cycle. So I think, again, in terms of broad transparency to the public and to the board about how those dollars and the projects might be reallocated, I think it's important to have specificity related to this.
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
All right, let's do roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-1, motion carries. We move now on to item 11, intergovernmental agreements for the provision of animal care and related services. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
This item speaks to a projected shortfall in revenue by Pima County Animal Care, and they are asking that any revenue shortfall be made up through a contribution from the general fund. My questions are, what is the dollar amount of shortfall that are being projected, and how much will be coming out of the general fund, and for how long?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I think, first let me step back a moment, that part of this is being funded by a variety of jurisdictions with whom we have had intergovernmental agreements to pay for services. To be candid, this is a funding source that we have charged to jurisdictions because we can and because we hope to use this as a tool by which we can get everyone agreeing to same standards of care. We hope we have that in the Valley, and that simply finding a revenue stream to augment the general fund by charging taxpayers in other jurisdictions because we could, not because it's potentially the right thing to do, seems like the appropriate time, and we have been asked by other members of the board to revisit looking at bringing this back. It is a general fund appropriation. It is going to take a cost to the general fund of about $4.6 million. It is a general tax that is provided by taxpayers throughout Pima County, whether they live in some of those incorporated jurisdictions or not. So we hope that we are providing fair and equitable services to all the folks of Pima County, regardless of what incorporated jurisdiction they choose to reside, and that it is an appropriate cost to the general fund that we should be allocating, and we should bring into the general fund. Again, this year we're looking at about $4.6 million, while it is decreased revenues but increased license fees, which is why we get to about a $4.6 million, and it would be for the remainder of this policy in place where we no longer charge jurisdictions.
And how long is that?
For as long as there is a policy in place that we no longer charge the jurisdictions.
So we're not going to charge the jurisdictions anymore, but we are going to take the revenue shortfall out of the general fund?
For which it is our belief that the taxpayers of those jurisdictions are paying.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I concur with, I was just going to call you Supervisor Lesher, excuse me, County Administrator Lesher, that it is, you nailed it, it's fair and equitable. And I'm not finished.
I'm sorry.
It's fair and equitable, and I think it's about how we should behave as a region. So with that, Supervisor Christie.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point out a couple. Are Marana and Sahuarita, are they still out of the whole process? They're not contributing?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, they have chosen to have their agreements with the Humane Society. I have met with the mayor and the managers of both Sahuarita and Marana and made them aware of what this board might be considering and what might be a change in operations starting with a new fiscal year. At this point, we've also been discussing this with the Humane Society to make sure there might not be a negative impact on them. At this point, it's my understandings from Mayor Murphy and Honey that they are pleased with the service they're getting through the Humane Society, but that with the change in policy by the board, they may choose to revisit at some time in the future.
So the entire community is not participating. There are two jurisdictions that are opting out on the program, and that probably adds to the shortfall.
No.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, they are not paying in now. But when I talk about every community is participating, the taxpayers of both the towns of Marana and Sahuarita are paying property tax into Pima County to pay for the services of Pima Animal Care.
Thank you. If there are no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection, Supervisor Christie. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 12, compromising taxes, interest, and penalties. Staff is requesting that the board compromise taxes, interest, and penalties incurred for the following parcel numbers, and I won't read them. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
In the background, Pima County Treasurer Beth Ford makes a recommendation on this matter that I think this board should follow and adhere to, and she says that her recommendation would be to obtain an independent appraisal of the properties and to negotiate a reasonable amount to compromise the taxes, interest, and penalties due for these 5 parcels with the condition that the property be developed. Given the current situation with the property, the county will never collect any of the delinquency retained to those properties, and hence this property will continue to be unproductive. it would be beneficial to the community to have this property developed and to once again be a productive property. Although I do not want to encourage taxpayers to not fulfill their tax obligation, this is a very unique situation. It's a former landfill out on Broadway, and I would make the motion or a substitute.
Well, let's, we have Mr. Hermes here from Snell and Wilmer. Did you wish to respond? No, not an honor yet.
Yes,
no.
Chair. Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. Ed Hermes on behalf of Sterling Real Estate and with the law firm of Snell and Wilmer, just here to answer questions. We agree with and appreciate the staff recommendation. This piece of property is very unique in that it was a city landfill for many, many years. Sterling Real Estate, who I represent, came to own it in about 1999. At that time, penalties, interest, and past property taxes had accrued for many years, this property not being able to be developed or used due to the prior use of it being a landfill. So we'd like to get this property developed in usable at its current state. It's not possible to do that because of the prior property tax penalties, and most of it is frankly is interest. So this is the purpose of the policy and the state statute that allows this board to abate and compromise those taxes so we can put this property back into use. So appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? And we have Ms. Ford here too, if she wants to. And we'll probably call you back up. Ms. Ford, did you want to make any comments?
Madam Chair, member of the board, I'm here to answer any questions you may have on this matter.
Madam Chair, could you respond to the gentleman's position on just the interest alone and relate that to your suggestion of an independent appraisal?
Sure. Excuse me, the taxes, penalties, and interest right now due on the property is almost $4 million, and the taxes go back to 1986. There has been absolutely no interest in this property from an investor's perspective to pick up any kind of tax lien, and because of the environmental risk on the property, the county has declined trying to foreclose on that property as well. So I don't foresee any possibility of us collecting any taxes or interest on this property unless we end up compromising with it.
And Madam Chair, and that compromise would come from an independent appraisal?
That's going to be up to you. That would be my recommendation. I'm the tax collector, so I can't tell you how much that property is really worth and what would be a fair compromise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Ford.
All right. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair, I would...
Supervisor Scott.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. I just wanted to ask if there is I know Ms. Lesher had to step away, but is there a member of administration who can respond to the suggestion from the treasurer?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Scott, Ms. Lesher did ask me to comment if any questions came up. So I think as the duly elected treasurer, Ms. Ford has offered you her recommendation that compromising of the taxes be tied in a form related to an appraisal of the property. So the board has at its discretion today the ability to compromise it for the full amount or to condition that compromise upon completion of an appraisal. That would result in then information being brought back to the board, presumably to indicate here's the information and the value associated with the appraisal, and then you can decide whether at that time you'd like to compromise the full amount or some lesser amount based on that new information.
Mr. Hermes, did you want to respond?
Madam Chair, thank you for allowing me to be here. I think if the board would like to have us do an independent appraisal, of course we will cooperate and work together with the treasurer to do that and come back. Our goal is to get a compromise in place so that this land can be productive. It's been unproductive for close to 50 years now, and that is our goal. So to do that, we're more than happy to work with the treasurer and with this board to get that done.
All right. Then, Mr. DeBonis, if I'm to amend my motion, since I made it, that would include the appraisal, what would be the language, appropriate language?
Madam Chair, I think there's two ways you can go. You can continue the item and provide direction that the applicant for this request work with the treasurer and bring back information to the board when that's available. That would be an option, and
Okay,
maybe the
that
cleanest,
sounds, yeah, that
maybe the
sounds,
cleanest approach.
yeah, I think that's, so I'm going to withdraw my motion and have us continue this item. And the seconder, is that okay with the person? I think that, who, did you second? Who seconded it? Okay.
Madam Chair, it was Supervisor Scott.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that, Madam Chair, but I wanted to ask, in the normal course of such matters, who would conduct an independent appraisal?
Mr. DeBonis?
Madam Chair and Supervisor Scott, would be the applicant for this request that would conduct the appraisal. When that's completed, our real property services staff will, be available to review that and provide any comments. And should there be question about the methodology or the conclusions from an appraisal certification standpoint, we can certainly note those to the board and, if necessary, provide assistance in trying to resolve any questions that arise.
So then my motion is going to be to continue this item pending the appraisal, and then bring it back to the board at that time.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Herman.
Appreciate your time.
Safe trip back to Phoenix. Moving on to item 13. This item requires a unanimous vote. I will move the item. It's a donation of surplus property.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Chair Bronson?
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there is a process by, is there an application process, or how are nonprofits or other governmental agencies aware that this is an option?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Grijalva, we have a process by which once a vehicle has met its useful life and is no longer in service, they are determined to be surplus, and they're scheduled through an auction through a contracted vendor that we have who conducts those contracts. The specifics about with whom the contracted vendor reaches out and makes surplus equipment aware, that piece I don't know, and we're happy to provide that for you, but we do it through a contracted vendor.
Yeah, I'd like to know, because this is a donation, so the, in this case, Marana Domestic Water Improvement District is just going to get the vehicle for free. And I'm just wondering how the contractor goes about that, because there's a lot of nonprofits that could utilize surplus property that we have in the county. The only ones I've seen have been vehicles, but I don't necessarily have an issue with this specifically. I'm just wondering if there is a process.
We will provide a report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, there's no further discussion. Is there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 14, abandonment by vacation, Resolution 2022-19. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections?
Chair Bronson?
Yes.
Is this the one tied to number 11 on consent? Are they connected?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Grijalva, yes, it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
There's no further discussion. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We're moving on to hearings, franchise license and permits. This is a liquor license, item 16. This is a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us in opposition to this item at this time? If not, I move to close the hearing and approve the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 17, hearing conditional use permit P22CU 00001, Forest Investments LLC, The applicant is here if there are any questions. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us in opposition to this item at this time? If not, what's the pleasure of the board? Supervisor Christie.
Sorry, Madam Chair, was this item 18?
No, 17. It's a conditional use in District 4.
Oh, I beg your pardon. This is a huge, wonderful plan up in Summerhaven, and I would like to close the hearing and move that that in accordance with Section 18.41.040 of the Pima County Zoning Code, that the staff and the hearing administrator recommend approval, as does this board, for Forest Investments, LLC, North Sabino Canyon Park.
I'll second. So we're closing the hearing and approving as recommended by the staff and hearing administrator. And any discussion, any objections? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously, and can't wait to see that being that expansion. So congratulations. Okay, that brings us to our final item on the regular agenda, Finance and Risk Management. This again is a hearing, Code Text Amendment, Ordinance Number 2022-8, relating to risk management and amending the Pima County Code, Title 3, Revenue and Finance, Chapter 3.04, Section 3.04.120, to increase the approval authority amounts for the settlement of claims. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
on the background, there's some items that I think need to be looked at for perhaps a bit of cleaning up. If you look at the 4 bullet points offered in the background paper, that shows the ranges of claims that can go to certain entities, finance and risk, civil division, county administrator, and eventually to the board. But if you read in each one, it says from up to 15,000 to up to 30, up to 30, up to 50, up to 50, up to 100. And then the final bullet says from any claim over 50,000 to any claim over 100,000 for the board. There seems to, I think there's a conflict between the third and fourth bullet points, and might need some clarification because I found them to be confusing. Is there something I'm not reading or missing, or?
If I may, Chair Bronson, Maria Luna is our risk manager. Come on, explain it. Thank you.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, as I'm looking at now, I understand that there's some confusion, and we'll be happy to, our department put that forward so we can revise or make some changes.
So how would it be revised?
What we would be doing is increasing it. Currently, as it stands, 15,000, it would go, so the way it reads currently, it's from 15 to 30,000 goes to risk management for approval. So we'd be moving it from actually up to 30,000 to 50,000. So actually, it's the latter number going to the higher number is what it would be reviewed. But I understand where there may be some confusion.
So the question becomes, should we continue to the item while you make the correction, or?
Chair Bronson, I would recommend that. We're happy to come back in 2 weeks with the final document.
Okay, I'm going to withdraw my motion and to approve, and I ask that this be continued for 2 weeks.
Okay, Chair Bronson, question. So what you're saying then for the amendment increases, right now it reads up to 15,000. You want it to read up to 30,000.
Up to 30,000,
So
yes.
it's not like a range, it's just, right now it reads 15, it's going to 30. For civil division, it's from 30,000
it's going
up to
to
50,000.
50,
So
yes.
there's not a typo, it's just, I see if you're reading it like as a range, I understand what you're saying.
It doesn't read
But
clear,
it's
I
not, I
understand
mean,
that.
I don't know that it requires major wordsmithing, it's just currently reads up to 50. I feel like we could vote for it. Because it's not a typo, it's just, it would say currently reads up to 15.
Okay.
Will now read up to 30, right?
yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it correctly.
No, you were, and I
All right.
understand.
Thank you.
But
Supervisor Christie, where it was
I
confusing.
understand his confusion, but I'll then go back to my original motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion, any
So
further?
the changes will be made normally, even after we approve it today?
Yes, Supervisor Christie, they will.
Just so it's easier to understand.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, and we have to close the public hearing.
Okay.
Because this was a hearing.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no further discussion, any objections, hearing none, motion carries. Let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to the addendum agenda.
Okay.
and we can reconvene our regular meeting and move on to the addendum agenda. We're still waiting for one board member, but I think we have a quorum here. And if we could take care of some more, I think, our routine items, like under the, oh, here comes, I think, no? All right, let's move to item 10 on the addendum agenda, certificate of removal and abatement, certificate of clearance. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none. Motion carries. If you look at items 11, 12, 13, and 14, again, I think these are routine items. Does anybody wish to divide the question?
Madam Chair, I'd like to divide the question and remove item number 11, please.
Okay. So items 12, 13, and 14, I'll move those items.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries, so we've approved items 12, 13, and 14. Moving on to item 11, I'll move that item quickly.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, this is the costs incurred with the Taylor Pima County case regarding the Hotel Pioneer fire, going back to the 1970, I believe it was. My question is, I was under the impression that this had been settled and that the things had moved on and that the county was no longer involved with this, yet we keep, according to the background, we're asking for another $200,000 to litigate this issue that I heretofore had thought was taken care of. So I guess this is information only. Am I wrong in remembering that this was a legal issue that has been settled?
Ms. Lesher or Mr. Brown?
Chair Bronson, I would defer to Mr. Brown on this item.
Hey, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the criminal matter has been settled. The civil case is still ongoing. And so this is an extension for outside counsel for the civil matter.
The civil case being that Mr. Taylor was wrongfully prosecuted, or?
He's seeking damages for relating to his imprisonment.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, if there's no further discussion, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on then to item 2, I entertain a motion to move into exec.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. If there are no objections, we'll convene in exec and reconvene in regular session at the sound of the gavel. Concluded executive session. We're back in regular session. We had one executive session item. It was information only. So let's move on to item 3, employment contract for county administrator. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Scott.
I move that we approve the employment contract that, as it is defined, attached to the agenda item.
I'll second.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor Grijalva.
I'm wondering if we can have Administrator Lesher just speak to, because this was something that was created and submitted to the board, and she was a part of drafting it, so I wanted her to address some of the points that I had some concerns about, including an equal pay, equal work kind of, salary, but there are also some other benefits that she's opted to not include, because this was based on our previous administrator's contract. So I just wanted to give her the opportunity to address it.
And thank you, Chair Bronson and Supervisor Grijalva. As I mentioned with you when I spoke, while I'm moving into this position, I'm following a gentleman who was here for some 29 years and went through, I believe, 7 or 8 contract negotiations. I believe that what had occurred over a period of years is that some years, probably in lieu of a significant salary adjustment, he received additional compensation. He received deferred compensation and a variety of other incentives that were significant dollars. There were also clauses within this contract that have appeared to become extremely controversial over a period of time, and the contract that I presented to you was the format that is used by the county administrator previously, eliminating all of the additional opportunities for compensation to the county administrator. It continues to provide me the opportunity to purchase county benefits at the same rate as any other county employee who's served the same number of years of service. It includes language that is very specific about any change or modification to the contract coming to this group. And it is, I proposed a salary that I believe to be fair and in keeping with where I have been in my years of service. As some of the conversation that I've had with some of you is the recognition that there is a potential difficult optics for some, that a man is leaving a job and a woman is taking that job and getting paid less. I am at peace with the salary being offered, as it is I'm in, month 3 of being the county administrator, and I have not worked at the county for 40-some years. What we've indicated is that my hope is that we will, our next step will be to develop a system by which there will be an evaluation, there will be goals, there will be a way that we can review the service provided by the county administrator, and that we can, if it is deemed appropriate, make any accommodations or modifications to the salary in years to come.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I think there were a number of us that had our heads wrapped around equal pay, equal work. Appreciate your comments. Any comments, further comments from board members?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
I will be voting against Ms. Lesher's contract for a number of reasons. Going back to the original objection I had with the application process and the search process for Mr. Huckleberry's replacement, I felt then, as I feel now, that the most prudent way to do this was open up the job to applicants within the county administration, and then into the region, and then into the state, to see what is out there and what the market might play. Ms. Lesher would be more than welcome to have applied as any other applicant. She may very well have won over all the other applicants, but we don't know that because the application process and the search process was denied by this board, which I think would have taken away a lot of the optics that we were dealing with and all of the controversies that we have now had to raise before this board. Secondly, I would have wanted to have at least instead of a 4-year contract for the new county administrator, it be reduced to a 1-year contract, also with a probationary period involved, just so that the residents of Pima County know that this board is observing, watching, and monitoring the new county administrator, and that we're not locked into a 4-year term with the county administrator, and that I think would motivate any new county administrator for performance purposes as well as oversight by this board. And finally, this contract has the elements of basically a boilerplate replication of Mr. Huckleberry's contract with some significant deletions, I admit, but nonetheless, it's derived its originality from Mr. Huckleberry's contract, and I think at this point, we need to have a new slate of leadership in the county administrator's office, and I am disappointed that there weren't some more safeguards put in that regard, so that's how I will be voting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other comments by board members? I'll call the question. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
No.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 3-2, motion carries. Moving on to item, we did 4, so we're on item 5, Board of Supervisors policy regarding senior leadership notification and consent of retirement and return to work. Supervisor Hines.
Thank you, Chair Bronson. I think in light of what we experienced, excuse me, with regard to the, I guess, retirement of the previous county administrator, I believe we have to look at and discuss this policy, which I will now read for the public present. So this is to direct the county administrator and staff to draft a new policy or policies for, of course, our approval, to outline the protocols and procedures necessary for when a member of senior county leadership or a highly paid employee in any department chooses to retire and return to work for Pima County, either full-time, part-time, for any period of time, according to ASRS rules and state statute. And in the case of the retirement of a county administrator, a return to work for Pima County in any capacity and under any circumstances shall be allowable only with the express consent of the Board of Supervisors through action taken in a properly noticed public meeting of the Board of Supervisors prior to such return to work taking effect. Such return to work shall be for a finite and defined period as expressly authorized by the Board of Supervisors and shall necessitate the creation and execution of a new employment contract for said period. In the case of the retirement of a deputy county administrator, assistant county administrator, department director, deputy department director, or other highly paid employee as defined, a return to work for Pima County in any capacity and under any circumstances shall be allowable only with the express written consent of the county administrator with timely notice provided by the county administrator to the Board of Supervisors. And then under no circumstances shall the county administrator or any person in a county leadership role be able to retire and return to work without the full knowledge of the Board of Supervisors as well as the public. And so I would move that we adopt this.
Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. That was, it seemed to me, maybe I'm confused, but you were combining both 5 and 6 in this?
I think that was just item 5.
Okay. All right, item 6.
Madam Chair, just as a point of information, I understand where Supervisor Hines is coming from. Is there a way that it could be referred for further analysis by
Well, let's get
staff?
to item 6, which is somewhat similar, and you're right, I think maybe there needs to be a larger policy discussion. So item 6, again, Supervisor Hines.
So this regarding a change in employment status would direct the county administrator and staff to draft new personnel policy or amend existing policy or policies as necessary regarding protocols and notice expectations for an employee looking to retire, resign, take a paid or unpaid leave of absence, or otherwise leave their post indefinitely or for an extended period of time. An employee wishing to initiate such a change in their employment status, if eligible, must provide written notice to their department director, human resources, and the county administrator, and receive written acknowledgement of receipt of that and or approval of the same before initiating the change. And in the case of the county administrator or clerk of the board, that written notice shall be delivered to the full board of supervisors, both by email and hard copy, at least 90 days prior to the desired date of such a change.
All right, is there, is that in the form of a motion?
And I would move that exact item, yes.
I'll second that motion for discussion. As I said it earlier, these two items, I think, have some really good stuff in it, and that there should be some analysis made by either the county attorney's office or HR or payroll, and maybe fine-tune it, take some ideas from it, add some more to it. But I think it's of a significant nature that it does need some discernment. And I think in both of these items, Supervisor Hines has covered a lot of territory that's very worthwhile, but I don't feel comfortable approving either one of them without some study or some significant analysis by either the county attorney's office or HR.
Thank you, Supervisor Christie. I share those concerns, and I think we also have some conflict with Arizona State Retirement System here as well. So yes, this is something that needs to go back to HR and probably to the county attorney. And Administrator Lesher, you have a comment.
Just Chair Bronson, I'd like to suggest that I believe that we have heard the general direction and policy tone of the board loud and clear, and I'd like to propose, since this was direction for us to come back and modify administrative procedures, perhaps we could, I will work with the county attorney's office and other staff and look at drafting a policy that we hope meets the criteria you've established for review by the board.
Thank you.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor
I also,
Carl?
if we can highlight what the current procedures are and then how this change would affect, because it maybe just written notice to a department director, depending on where this individual works, is already happening, and it's just going to HR. It doesn't necessarily have to be CC to the county administrator. I mean, I think there's some, in order to make sure that it affects the notice that I think that is in the spirit of this, which I agree with. I'm just trying to minimize some of the extra paperwork and like how many hands have to touch a request in order for it to be approved. But I do think that, I think as a result of what happened, there just needs to be some check and balance and modification of the policies in order to make sure that we're doing what we've been elected to do and monitoring some of these things, and even just being in the loop on some of the changes.
And again, we've got privacy issues as well that we need to be cognizant.
Madam Chair, if I could, just a thought, and if with Supervisor Hines' permission, there is in existence right now a non-interference clause, which I believe stipulates that no board member can have any kind of interference or interaction with any of the department heads. Could we have that included in Supervisor Hines' analysis with the staff, just to see if that is kind of cutting our nose off to spite our face? I think with maybe the lack of this non-interference clause, things might have gone a little bit smoother with this situation we've developed by allowing us to interfere. And if we could get some kind of a determination from staff on the non-interference clause, if that's all right, Dr. Hines.
That's fine if they want to look at it. My understanding of the non-interference was that an individual board member can't be like trying to hire and fire like one specific department head or any other employee. That's my understanding, but
that's part of it. Also, I think going into a department head meeting and and taken over.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, that that clause came into existence because a previous board had done just that, and it cost us at least $5 million in settlement.
And do you have a timetable on when we might be able to?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, let's shoot for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's fine. Great, thank you.
All right, there was a motion on the floor and a second. I'm assuming you want to withdraw the motion at this point?
Yeah, I will
Okay.
withdraw the motion.
Okay. Okay. All right. The motion is withdrawn, and now let's move on to item 7 under County Administrator, Education Reimbursement Program. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie.
This program was in effect up until, what, roughly 2008? And what happened then?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is my understanding that is one of the benefits provided to employees that was removed during the Great Recession when we were cutting funds.
So now that the Great Recession is over, we can reinstate this. Do we know what the cost is?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the request before you today is to set a cap at $500,000 that we would include then in next year's budget, and then we would then have the opportunity to begin to review what the process is looking like, what our usage is, how many people we have coming forward to receive educational reimbursement. But the $5,000 cap is our request before you today to allow us to then put the administrative procedure in place. The dollars that we are recommending are based on, we've talked to other jurisdictions, other communities, other institutions to see what is the appropriate amount or what is an average amount that we reach out to which provide for county employees or employees of any organization to encourage their educational advancement.
It seems to me, just sitting on this board as long as I have, that there are millions and millions of dollars of grants, job creation, job development grants coming through this board on numerous occasions, practically every meeting. Is there not some kind of a pathway where employees can apply for some of these grants that we approve here in this same manner? Why does it have to be out of our pocket when there's so many millions being provided in other taxpayer money forms that could qualify employees to pursue any kind of educational degree based on a grant?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there are other funding opportunities available for individuals. What we have been doing for the last many months is looking at a variety of benefits, if you will, that could be provided to county employees to encourage individuals to come to work for the county and to stay working at the county, and then hopefully while they're working at the county, increasing their skills and becoming more educated so that they can continue to be better members of the county workforce.
And you don't see that this would be a motivation for an individual to further their educational background and become more highly qualified and leave the employee for a better, of the county, the employment of the county for a better job?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, that has not been the experience with other institutions necessarily that have educational reimbursement, but it is one of the items that we hope we will evaluate. Again, we have asked for a $500,000 budget allocation that gives us time to actually get the program up and running, implement it, and begin to see what the results might be to ensure that we are using it as an incentive to not only attract but to retain employees here at Pima County.
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
Yeah, I'm so glad to see this. I think that, we have to also address the concerns that we've heard from many department heads in meetings where there are people retiring and we don't necessarily have the qualified staff in-house or with the right certificates to be able to take those positions. And so this totally fits into continuing to grow our own in Pima County, but also as a draw. I really do think that this will draw people who are, need to continue to work, but also are interested in continued education. And so I'm happy to support it.
Any other comments? Let's do a roll call vote.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-1, motion carries. Moving on to item 8, recommendation for additional sick leave for those negatively affected by the April 2020 stay-at-home order. I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor Christie.
do we know the cost of this?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't estimate a cost in that. What we have done is amend this so that it is not, these are not dollars that are eligible for an individual to take with them when he or she leaves county employee. So when we budget an annual salary for an individual, it's based on 2,080 hours. That cost remains the same, while we may be providing them some additional sick leave, which we're providing so that, again, our hope is that we provide an environment where both our county employees, our workforce, and the public who comes in to meet with the workforce are not coming to work when they're sick. All we've done is expend some more hours, but they cannot take the hours with them, so there is no additional hard cost to the county.
So by providing sick leave, paying people when they're sick, you can't factor in what a cost analysis might be?
Again, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, an individual is provided the same salary that they are earning 2,080 hours of pay. We're indicating that of that cap of the 2,080 hours, we are affording some individuals who may have used up all their time when they were at the stay-at-home order to be able to then access additional leave. It means that there are times in which they have access to sick leave in excess of what they currently have, but they do not get paid more.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection from Supervisor Christie. Any other objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. That concludes our meeting for today. If there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned.